People last time.
We will go ahead and unmute. Well, I don't even know where to stand in this room at this point, but I'm gonna.
I don't think it matters.
No, I think you're probably right. Hi, folks. Welcome to the second meeting. It's a little bit sparsely attended, but we have a few people online. We will get started here. Today, we're going to give a recap of so this is the second steering committee meeting. My name is Amy Saxton. I work for Quigley County, for those of you who do not know. And this is the second steering committee meeting of the Dumont Boston Downeyville sub-area planning project. And tonight we have an agenda. Nancy Dosdall is here. I pronounced your name wrong.
Close enough.
I got a bunch of consonants and vowels in there, so that probably was pretty good. And Nancy's going to walk us through our meeting agenda, and we're going to do some deep dives on more of the topics that we started to explore and identify in the first section of our project, where we really presented some of the data that the team collected and started to get your information and responses to that to identify the core projects that this project is really focusing on. And so tonight is the first of 3 deep dive steering committee meetings where we'll dig into these projects and get feedback from all of you to help us identify the core priorities and principles around those projects. I'll hand it to you, Nancy.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And I am recovering a bit from a cold, so let me know if you can't hear me, or I'll let you know if my voice gives out. My second public hearing with the cold this week, so we'll see how it goes. And we're gonna want to put you to work tonight, so I guess that's why people didn't come, right? Darn it. We really want to get some on paper ideas from you that will go into the plan. But first, before we do that, we want to go through what we've done so far. And I think everybody's seen this already. We're here towards the end of April. We have had our public meeting. The results of the public meeting I've left around the room here, so that everybody can see the comments that we heard from the public meeting. I think you are probably all there, right? Great.
I did.
And what we're trying to do here now is, based on the first steering committee meeting and the public meeting, we've broken the project, the major ideas and concerns from the project into 4 areas. And I think we've already talked about those. Transportation is a big overall one, which includes public safety, walkability. So it has the bikes in there, it has the roads, it has I-70. Tonight we want to talk about housing, which is one of the other issues. And I think, as you've seen here, we heard a lot about Airbnbs. We heard a lot about current housing conditions. We heard a little bit about mobile homes and the mobile home parks and concerns with those. We're gonna refresh you on some of the statistics and what's going on with the overall housing environment in DLD. Then we're gonna hopefully dive in and get some real mission statements and goals and objectives for DLD on housing from you tonight. The other 2 topic areas were sort of community voice and aesthetics, we've called it. We heard quite a bit about the lack of voice and ability to interact with the county, the fact that even if you had a voice, maybe you're not being heard. So we want to keep that as a topic area also. And those will be coming up in our next steering committee meetings. So I think if you checked your email, we moved the next steering committee meeting to the 16th of May. We're gonna focus on transportation at that, and transportation safety at that, okay? With that, I'm gonna just get going. We do know that there is, my computer's about to restart message, so Megan, if you need to save me, save me.
Yep, I will do so.
I think with this small group, I'm not gonna go over our ground rules because I'm expecting everyone to be respectful and
If you
listen.
want to stop sharing, I'll start sharing for you.
Guys, stop.
It's up to you if you think your computer's gonna shut down. Thank you.
I could read it. Your computer, oh, it's got 4 hours.
Oh, you're good. But I'm happy to if you need it.
Okay. Glasses always help. I'm not gonna go through all of this.
I can't. Sorry, I think it's just the settings of the meeting. I can't mute them, but if whoever called in, if you could mute your phone, that would be great. We could just hear some background noise. I think it's a 215 number.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we got them. All right, so we went over the statistics on the area. I just wanted to highlight some briefly and go a little bit more into detail on some of those. So we learned that the population's declining on the area. Very sharp decline from 2000 to 2020 to 2020. Not declining so much after that, just a little bit. So it feels like from the information that's the census, which isn't always correct, and especially when we're diving into such a small area. Sometimes the margin of error is fairly large. So we look to you people to say that feels right or that doesn't feel right. But hopefully the trends are good. But what it identified was a declining population and then a leveling off. Oh, go ahead.
But, there's not a single property that's vacant. Count.
Well, there are a few. Do you want to see them? But there's not a lot. You're right. We can go back to that if you want. Where was that one? Where I had the vacant ones on there. I think the white ones. There we go. Well, the county land, of course, and then that pale green on there are actually vacant. Now, a lot of them might not be buildable. I think they're on pretty steep properties. But there's some room for infill if that's what the community.
But those aren't housing units.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, I see. I know what you mean. Okay, sorry. Yes.
If the population's declining, then there'd be open housing.
Yeah, it's good, interesting point. What happened to those people? But I may be able to tell you a little bit of what happened. So there was only a small decline in housing units. So it lost population, but not housing units. Okay. Massive decline in rental units, but the same increase in ownership units. So what happened there, I guess, is that people used to be renting out houses. Instead, they moved into them or are reserving them for their use as second homes. Super small, it's 15% of the housing stock is a rental unit. Now, that doesn't count the fact that a mobile home rents land, okay?
Could I comment about the mobile home thing? In the last couple of decades, when water rights became an issue, mobile home parks shut down. Remember, they moved out mobile homes because the wells that took care of those mobile homes were not legal. And so those mobile homes got moved out. If you look at Downeyville, where used to be mobile homes, there's empty
So
space
that's the decline in housing.
because of the water rights.
Well, I was gonna say there's a lot of housing units. Are you talking about structures or available housing? Because where I live, we have a lot of short-term rental. So
Short term.
so those places that were being rented out to the workforce are now short-term rentals.
So that's the other impact probably on the lack of rental units, yeah. The ESRI has predicted that there's going to be a rapid increase in home value. Not positive where that came from, but if you look at the fact, and we'll get there, that no new housing's getting built. If people do still want to move here and visit here or stay here, yes, your property values will probably go up. In the area, defined area, it showed 264 occupied units. 175 of those are single family. It has 12 of them being some type of multifamily or attached unit, duplexes, I don't know what. 77 or a third of the housing units in the area are mobile homes. What's in parentheses there is an interesting fact that we want to explore a little bit. The average occupancy is 1.94 people per unit. Okay, that's really low. So it's interesting that you have almost all single family homes or mobile homes with low occupancy numbers. For most communities, that's going to be closer to 2.5 people per unit. So it's pretty interesting. The other thing I think we found was that the average age is high. So I think you have less families in the area. And we can talk about why that might be. I put in there some affordability, which is if we look at the median income for DLD, which is lower than the county and lower than the state, and looking at what the median income earner could afford as far as purchase, $120,000 home. As far as rent, it's $960 in rent a month. Okay. Tried to compare that. Oh, well, we'll get to there. Here's another fact that I wanted you to all see, which is pretty interesting, and the chart's backwards to me, so I couldn't flip that easily. So what we've seen is that there's basically been no housing built since 2009. I think the county found maybe 2 units, but census is finding almost nothing in the last 20 years almost. Most of the housing in the area was constructed from 1960 to 1979, a little bit in the 80s also. And then we've got a big gap of nothing built. And then we've got 1930 and earlier, another huge percentage. And I'm gonna guess that, I've seen some nodding heads, that those older are the single family homes, a lot of them. And then in the middle, with the 1960 to 1999 construction is maybe Silver Lakes and also the mobile homes.
Ours is.
Yours in there?
We're right next to the LDS church.
Okay. So, and you were built in?
95.
So that housing is sort of the newer, but nothing's real new in your area?
Yeah,
Really?
one brand new house. Like Bob's, like cabin.
Yeah, on the other side of
Yeah,
us is new.
and then a lot of historic homes. When I looked to compare what can the average person afford? This is what Zillow pulled up earlier this week. Found a total of 3 homes. 2 of them were mobile homes in mobile home parks. Those technically would be affordable. What's interesting to the average wage earner, the $120,000 one though, may actually not be affordable, considered affordable to the average wage earner, because you have to add in lot rent to that. So, and when we talk affordable, it's 30, I think they're using 33% of your income going to housing. So definitely a crisis in the area. On the right side of that, sir, you see, I looked for rentals, there aren't any. So you're absolutely right, there's nothing available for anyone, and you know, your population certainly won't grow. If there's nothing to rent, there's nothing affordable to buy. Definitely a bit of a crisis going on there. If you're holding still, you're okay.
And I think that's what you see is a lot of people are just digging in and staying in their homes because they can't really afford to go anywhere else.
Right, it's a nationwide trend that the older folks, and a good percentage of those in this room, are staying put. Not freeing up that housing, so we're not getting families moving in. And yeah, the average age is growing and we're not getting the young blood. They don't have a place to be. When you're just starting out a new household, you really can't afford, well, we got an $845,000 home.
And the thing about purchasing a mobile home with any of these mobile home parks is the risk that you take with buying a mobile home. So if you come into a mobile home park and you buy a home and you aren't secure with the future of that park, you could lose all your equity that you put into that home. So that's a lot of a negative risk for people coming into mobile home parks.
Right.
I would like to say
others.
too, we've had 3 houses just on my block sell. Some of the elderly people are passing away in our area and they're being sold as second homes, all of them.
Who can afford the 845?
The
Yeah, 'cause in
the Texans
California's-
can.
Yeah.
And those homes have sat there. One has somebody that comes maybe every 2 years. It's actually 2 homes next to each other. They're hardly ever there.
It's devastating to the feeling of community and neighborhood, and I lived in Summit County for 12 years, in the 80s and 90s, and moved when I had kids because I didn't want them to be growing up. I wanted to grow up in neighborhoods with kids and people
Yeah,
that knew.
there's another one too that Linda Jeske passed away and her son is going to have trouble selling that home because it does not have its own water. So it was sharing water with the Rockwells, which was 3 homes together were sharing water. And the 2 houses that I was talking about, a family bought those 2 homes, so that works out for them. But now this separate one is now just sitting there.
With no
because there's-
water source.
They don't know what to do with it. And it's a brand new home. It
Wow.
was one of those that burned down a while ago and they rebuilt it.
Hmm.
So
So do you know the story on how they were able to serve 3 homes with 1 well?
they just were all doing
The
it. It was
state
just,
often allows permits that would be shared if they were doing it.
Realize that.
if anybody even knew they were doing it, I mean, they were all just friends and,
Oh,
you know, their families grew up together, so. And now, those people have passed on, Linda passed on, and then, Elsa Rockwell passed on, so the people that now own those, I'm sure they're not gonna want the same
right.
situation.
I don't know.
Okay, Amy, we wanted Amy to go over some of the initiatives the county's working on now.
Yeah.
so that everybody's on the same page before we start throwing ideas out.
Yeah, so there's a couple of your handouts are about this. I'm not going to talk about them in the order on there. So I'm going to start with the this handout is about the a housing project that is happening countywide. And it is
Okay.
a multi-part housing project that's been going on for about a year. The project is to evaluate to elevate the services related to, I almost just fell over, the services related to affordable housing and to improve resident services for affordable housing, primarily with an idea to form what is called a multi-jurisdictional housing authority. And that is where all 4 towns and the county would collaborate to form a new organization called a multi-jurisdictional housing authority. And that housing authority then would have some powers to do things like provide resident services, collaborate and coordinate resources to find new housing developments. This flyer here also is talking about the kind of campaign that we're doing along with that project, which is called I Say Yes. And the idea is that we want to gather feedback from people about what we want to do in this county to advance affordable housing. What are the pluses? It's a lot of the things that you all are talking about here. This flyer does invite you to fill out a survey and give your feedback on housing. And it's something that we would really encourage you to do. And again, it's countywide. It's not part of this particular planning project. It is related to this project. And so it's really an opportunity that you have to participate in this. It's a countywide project, and the resident services that this MJHA will be providing would be, of course, available and highly relevant to people who live in the DLD area, and resources for people who live in mobile home parks, resources for people who need rental assistance or want to learn about weatherization programs and all the money that's out there to help get your storm windows replaced or get your windows replaced or your heating replaced, all of that stuff. So that is one program, the I Say Yes program and housing survey. And then the other one is, this guy is a snapshot and some information of a dashboard that the county has put together that is a resource about the short-term rental permit program that the county operates. The QR code on here takes you to a different website, basically, that's like a dashboard that you can look at different neighborhoods and see how many properties are permitted for us, that how many properties are permitted with a short-term rental permit. The county has a short-term rental permit program that issues permits for people who are operating short-term rental where they don't have to be present. And that is noted here. We're calling it in this format called the absentee short-term rental program. The county also issues permits for primary resident short-term rentals, people who live in their home a certain months of the year and are just renting out a portion of their home, which is designed to give homeowners a way to monetize part of their home. It's not intended to be for people who do not live in the community. But what this is showing on here is the number of registered permits in the area on this map. And there are 14 absentee short-term rental permits registered in the county and 6 primary resident, not in the county, in the picture, in the map portion that is in this square. 6 primary resident permits that the pie chart, the yellow and purple pie chart show the primary resident and absentee permits. And then it's a total of 340 housing units when you're looking at all the units, if you include up Mill Creek, not just inside the area in the black bordered area. But this dashboard that you can get to by going to this QR code is really cool. If you're into things like that, and even if you're not, it's a resource. You can actually see the names and addresses of the permit holders. You can zoom in and see the exact lots that have a permit on it. And it's all public information and it's all available through this dashboard.
I can,
And then, oh, one other thing, just about the permit program. Right now, we are in the process of revamping some of the rules associated with the short-term rental program. Where it's a little bit technical, but we're moving the short-term rental program from having its authority vested in a zoning code to having its authority vested in an ordinance. And what that does is give the rule a little bit more teeth. We can issue penalties and fines if you don't follow the rule. And so that's one change we're making. And then we're also making some changes to the primary resident program rules. So it's we're raising the bar for how you establish your primary residency if you have a permit for being a primary resident short-term rental operator. So that was the rest of my speech. Shane, you had a question?
I was just gonna say, because I can tell, like, this one here, this is just what you have through the county, correct?
Yes, this is what,
I can tell you there's 2 houses on here that are not on here that are short-term rentals.
well, we need to know that. And to monitor it, we use a company that trolls listings on the internet to find listings and then matches the addresses of, or the locations of those listings.
I was gonna say, they don't put addresses on the
But-
website, so.
The website has the back end, so, they can connect to, so they can match with our listed permits and find if there's any listings that are advertised that are shown to be in the county that don't match with our permitted program listing, so we can find them. That doesn't mean we find every single one, but
Right.
that's our monitoring approach. So if there is one that you see that's not permitted, then we need to know that.
Is there something on the county website to go and say, I believe this address is a short-term rental that's not being reported?
The best place to do that would be through the complaint portal, through report a concern. But there's not a specific place to report, to make an STR complaint on our website. There is, we're in a transition with the permitting software that we're using. So normally it would do it through that permitting software, but we're not using that right now. So report a concern would be the best place.
If we're interested, I can look into making something like that on the short-term rental page if you want. but
Well,
it could
right
be a
now
form.
it's actually better to put,
Okay.
to have fewer places to report complaints than more.
Okay, got it.
So if I get a call about, something like that, report a concern, there's no specific thing.
Right. And that on report of concern, I think one of the choices is short-term rental.
Good.
So if that's the only way that you guys can look up, because VRBO right now is lobbying for Colorado, a bill to make it harder for governments to get that information, the addresses and stuff, if that goes through. And then isn't Georgetown having trouble collecting taxes from some of those businesses? It's Airbnb or VRBO?
Trouble collecting that from everyone, not just rentals, it's also the hotels.
Right, so any of yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, Georgetown is having trouble connecting.
but Clear Creek is not.
Our lodging tax, no.
That's
Oh, because that's their separate tax.
Georgetown's is separate. because
Yeah, so
they-
some of the people are paying twice, I heard, just to keep them out of trouble.
Georgetown has to collect their own.
Right.
State collects on it.
Okay,
That's why they're having a problem, is because they're having to collect their own.
right.
Yeah. The monitoring program is, I don't know exactly what rule you're talking about. I know that, yeah, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but
Yeah, when I get the number,
Yeah.
I'll find it out. It was
Okay.
somebody that has a short-term rental that's been monitoring this in Georgetown. And they're paying Georgetown and VRBO just because they don't want to be in trouble.
oh, yeah, I meant the,
Yeah, and they brought that up too, and they
Yeah.
said, so they're worried because they're in compliance, but they know a lot of people. I know somebody that up at St. Mary's that had a rental, made $48,000 a year. And then he said that the process for getting the permit, nobody came out to do the inspection. After 6 years of waiting for this inspection, he now has 3 more that he didn't even bother to go through the process. And then his sons are doing that now too.
Hmm.
So that's like 5 homes now that are
yeah,
not registered.
Interesting.
Mhm.
well, that's all good information, and that's not what we want.
I wonder how they account for their income.
Well, they still pay the state taxes and all that. It's just the county has trouble figuring out which ones are. And then also people will say because they live in Arizona with their mom or whatever. And so they'll say their residence is here, but it's technically not. So they get around different regulations too.
And we do, there's really digging in and trying to understand that then we really need to also understand the impact that it's having on housing and analyze what are the types of homes that are being utilized for short-term rentals. There's a lot to unpack and really understand what's
Right.
happening. So that is an ongoing problem that we're continuing to try to get better at.
Well, and I think it's going to take probably first to say,
Yeah,
this is happening next
Yeah.
door.
yeah, and I think for sure, yeah.
Just
So
a quick
then
question.
the last thing I wanted to talk about, yep,
Yeah, sorry, I just had a quick question.
sure.
I understood that Airbnb and VRBO now have to tax at source and remit that in terms of lodging tax. Is that not accurate?
I don't know.
Well, they're remitting to the state, they're not remitting to the county.
I mean, they do have to pay
Yeah, I
lodging
thought-
tax.
Yeah, okay, all right. So there's at least some way to monitor what's happening through those sources.
For the county, not for Georgetown.
Say that again, sorry. The county not for what?
For the county, the county has a way to monitor it through the state, but not Georgetown.
Okay. Okay, all right.
So, thank you. And then the third topic I wanted to just touch on was accessory dwelling units, which is like if you build a garage apartment or something, or add an apartment or something for income potential, which is not unrelated to short-term rentals, because sometimes that is might get used for short-term rentals. But for expanding housing for a long-term rental unit, one of the things that is different about the DLD area in terms of its being a prospective area to utilize accessory dwelling units as a strategy for adding housing units. Because DLD is on a sanitation system, there's a lot more flexibility and possibilities for ADUs to be a strategy for adding rental units, long-term rental or short-term, but long-term in particular, I think is what's more potentially needed. Because our code limits adding accessory dwelling units because it would consider the capacity of a septic system, for example. And if you're adding accessory dwelling units on a property that's served by a septic system, you'd be adding bedrooms and bathrooms and a kitchen, which may exceed the capacity of the septic system that you have on your property. But if you're served by a sanitation system, that's less of an issue. You don't have that capacity cap that a septic system has. when you have sanitation.
There is the issue of a well. If you have a well that serves your property, please look at your well permit because it may say household use only, which means one household.
Right.
And you would need to address that. You can't just build another unit and serve it off of your well. You would be,
Thank you, Lisa. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And that is not that that's not a problem to solve. It is definitely a problem to solve for sure. It is just still a distinction that it's one less barrier to an accessory dwelling unit that DLD has in terms of that as a strategy for adding long-term rental capacity, if that was as we talk about housing in general.
Yeah, I'll just second to that. Sorry, Adam Springer, senior planner. Yeah, Lisa, that's a big one and actually cuts out a lot of ADUs. So just wanted to echo that's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So is there a legal way to change that well permit? I'm just curious because there are people who have individual, household wells. There are people who have commercial wells, whatever. And there's a county strategy with a water bank. So is there a legal strategy that can be identified that would enable people who, if they feel they have a strong enough well, that they could add an ADU?
legally, if they would join the county's water augmentation program and pay to have their well augmented, the State Division of Water Resources would accept that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And perhaps if you were doing it as a long-term rental, that would pay, that might work.
Right, there are certain incentives that governments can offer for certain kinds of development.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. That's super helpful.
So Amy or Adam, to clarify, if someone wanted to take one of these larger homes, convert a couple bedrooms to a separate apartment, they were on the sewer system, they could get the water. Is that possible under your codes now?
Converting units inside an existing structure?
I can kind of talk to that.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
Yeah, sure. So
Building
yeah,
code.
we recognize ADUs a little bit differently. So we really recognize an ADU as only being a detached structure,
Yeah.
unless it's actually attached and you can't get it doesn't have connecting. It's basically separated, so you have only one access to both units. Then we look at it as an ADU, if that makes sense, kind of like a duplex. There's no internal access. Otherwise, it's just detached. And the Division of Water Resources, just to add to Joanne's thoughts there, does have a policy kind of stating, that they don't think that exempt water right meets their definition of ADU, doesn't cover that piece for detached structures that are ADUs. So hopefully that clarifies it a little better.
I'm confused still. So if you wanted to convert rooms over a garage or had a way to do a separate entrance, is that possible?
So a separate entrance does make it an ADU. So then we look at it as an ADU and it needs to meet all of our ADU regulations. But if it has internal access and folks are just wanting to rent out their rooms, then we don't look at that. We're not keeping track of bedrooms. Then they just need to have, the appropriate amount of septic and whatnot. We're not looking at it as an accessory dwelling unit at this point in time.
Okay,
Well, I think
so it
that
sounds like it's an option.
Yeah, I think water is obviously still a limiter. And that's, something that we can include as we get further down the line and start to work on developing a plan and a strategy and see where we have options and how this might work. But the sanitation district is a distinction that this area of unincorporated Clear Creek County has, that areas that rely on septic systems do not. And that I think that offers us something, and we'll figure out how to frame what flexibility that means as we develop this plan.
when we look at accessory dwelling units and short-term rentals and all the other situations that homeowners bring into the county, why do they do it? And I think many of the people that we've talked about do it for additional income. And I think in considering how to approach a housing problem for affordable, that's somehow to have an incentive on that level to take away, to make it more attractive to do something with affordable housing that's subsidized. Once the housing authority gets active, that should develop. That's probably one of their things. They go out and they look at, they say the situation. If it's subsidized, then someone that has a short-term rental would be enticed to do something more for the affordable. And the other thing with that is I've had people call me that were interested, they have short-term rentals, and they were interested in seeing if they could help someone that needed affordable housing. Would there be any enticement for them? Would there be a benefit for them? Because short-term rentals pay a lot. So I think this whole idea of looking at it as a problem could be flipped to
Isn't that what Summit County is looking at?
The,
The incentive that she's
Yeah.
talking about, because we can keep building and they will just keep buying.
right.
You know, we are not going to solve our problem, but
That's our competition.
yes, and it's endless.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's people from Australia, they're all over the place and they can buy houses online now. You don't even have to come visit here. If they see there's money to be made in this area, which there is, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. many communities incentivize accessory dwelling units, limiting them not to allow short-term rentals. So it's a long-term rental option. Boulder was kind of a pioneer on that, where they super encourage people to put an apartment in an existing home. Especially they'll call mother-in-law units, you know, or so if an elderly, parent needs help, you could give them their own a little bit of independence, but have them in the home with you. Reverse it, let the kids move in and the older people
Right.
move to the apartment. It can help as far as as far as subsidizing your mortgage if you have a rental unit. There's a lot of advantages to them. Sounds like it just, from the statistics in this community, you got a lot of single family homes. They're not, they're sparsely occupied. It does seem like if you can get past the water, and there's cost. Because you have to meet building code and to have a separate unit, there's a lot of cost in building that. But if that can be incentivized, it's a way to get rental units into the area. It's a way to keep people in their homes. It's a way to get new people into housing that maybe can't afford a payment, or need to help subsidize the payment. So anyway.
And the other piece that we have that we could let people know about is we have a pretty good setup for Section 8 vouchers. And I know that has a bad connotation, but for us, with the Grand County Housing Authority being the management of that, they really are a robust management program. So if someone is interested and will agree to be that landlord, Grand County Housing Authority takes over the management of it, and that renter will behave because they will lose that situation. So, and we have that program right here now in the county. But, you have to attract. Why would somebody do that to get that income? What would be the benefit for them?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and it's a big investment.
Yeah.
Let's see, I think this was just going over some of the what we've heard. This is sort of the mobile home park review. All right, well, I really want to get to your ideas. I guess we don't need maybe just two groups or one group. How do we want to do that? I know we have an online group. How many have you got there online?
We've got 10.
Oh,
There's 13 in all, so I'm trying to subtract us, and the room is one person technically, so.
Well, we have to do that as well.
just one.
Yeah, we don't really have an option to do.
Well, and I think
do
at least
breakout
3 of
rooms.
them are staff.
Okay,
Yeah,
4's the rooms, so.
sure.
Okay, so what we want to do is to get your ideas on paper. We've got 3 discussion topics. You can add more. But the 3 that we've come up with are if new housing is a priority, where should new housing be located, and what type of new housing should be prioritized? The second prompt we have is if we prioritize improving the existing housing. We heard a lot about that at the public meeting. What should be prioritized? And then the third topic under mobile home parks. So what's the strategy with the existing mobile home parks? Try and protect them. I gotta be careful here. It says redevelop. Obviously, nobody's doing that too. It's private property. But incentivize redevelopment, might be a better word for that. Encourage ownership, and of, with the
resident.
owners of the residents, yeah, owning it. And there's statute now that helps on that. Again, what do you think about the mobile home parks? We want you to kind of go over that, write down your ideas. I really want to save time, and we have to be out of here at 6, before 6,
Yeah, a little
because
bit
there's
before
another
6.
meeting at 6. So I want to give you time to really, as a small group, discuss these kind of thoroughly, get your ideas down on paper, and then I'd really like everybody to come back. So we want you to pick someone to report for your group. And this includes the online folks, to give us, so we can all hear all the ideas. Okay? Ready?
Go.
Break.
All right.
Right, yeah.
The park is hard.
I might figure out how we can get into.
Let's see, it's Wednesday night, not Board of Adjustment.
So that you don't have to tear our.
So we're good to mute us in here?
You might
Yeah.
be able to stay at one of the,
Online group.
get home for a couple years before they figure out that
And just talk amongst yourselves.
somebody's in it.
Fine.
Okay, folks. So the online folks, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, great. I'm hoping the people in the room cannot hear me. Because that would be annoying for them. So for those of you who are at the first steering committee meeting, we did something similar where I kind of helped facilitate the online group. For those of you whom I haven't met, I'm Mark Nolan. I work with Nancy at SEH. I'm a senior planner with SEH, and helping her out with some of the engagement aspects. I'm also a transportation planner, so we'll focus on transportation here in a few weeks. But today's focus is on housing. So I'm hoping that those of you who are online can perhaps turn your cameras on, just so we can kind of see each other. That would be great. Hello, Daniel. Good to see you again.
Hello.
Autumn as well. So I know Nancy Dosdall, who shows up here, she's at the meeting, obviously, as is Amy. So if you don't want to turn your camera on, that's just fine too. So here's what we're going to do. I would like to pick someone who isn't a consultant like myself or a county employee like Adam to be the person who's going to report back to the group. So do we have any volunteers to do that? And I will take notes as well.
If notes are taken, I will go ahead and do it.
Okay, well, the notes, hopefully you can take your own notes as well. Just because I'm not quite sure how I can share mine. So it looks like we still have the slide up here, and with a focus on housing, let's just go through and discuss the first question. So we're talking about new housing. And first of all, let's just ask the primary question of those here. So that would be Autumn, Adam, is it Dan or Daniel?
Dan.
Dan and Nancy and Trish, and we have someone calling from a phone, 215 area code. You want to introduce yourself? And if you can hear me and you're answering, you might be on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, this is Mike Tansey, and it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to participate since I can't see things,
Sure.
but I'll chime in when I can.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can. We're not going to really do anything visual during this portion, just kind of a discussion. So for you folks here, who thinks, and please chime in and tell us why, that new housing is a priority as opposed to improving existing housing or doing nothing at all? Do we think that new housing should be something to focus on?
Yes.
All right, tell me more, Dan.
I mean, at the end of the day, it increases the supply of housing, which will reduce the pressures on all of the existing housing. So I see new housing as basically the same as improving existing housing.
Great. Any other thoughts on that?
I think there needs to be a balance of both. Improve what we have for the people who are already here, and hopefully we keep them here, and then also grow on that, but within the limits of our infrastructure. We have to keep those in mind, like we had discussed earlier, with the water and having the ability to utilize the water.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Just a general thought about new housing in DLD.
I don't know, if you can see the chat, Nancy, who is my wife, is commenting there. So
Okay.
she was seeing if you saw it.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did give her a thumbs up. So Nancy says, yes, new housing as long as it's affordable to local residents. It's a good point, Nancy. Okay. Well, since there seems to be a little consensus on the need for new housing, a couple of questions about that. And we can answer these both at the same time. Do you have any ideas about where new housing should be located? And it could be a specific lot or location, or it could be just general thoughts about context and where we should think about new housing. And then perhaps the type of housing. And taking into account some of maybe the information that Nancy and Amy have shared so far today.
I don't think oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I do think we need more multi-family units. We're able to get more people in a smaller area. But again, having the ability to support those is another question altogether, especially with the water table continuing to drop. And then, also we, needing to make sure it's up to the code. We have to make sure that those are all followed, and some, Colorado's some of the stringent codes in the nation. So, costs is also going to be an issue. How are we going to build it while maintaining affordability?
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So,
Yeah.
So, quick background. Nancy and I are currently building a house, and I can tell you that I wanted to build a house that had no bedrooms, just a bathroom, and that was effectively impossible under our current building codes. That's part of it, that clearly the IRC is designed to be easier for essentially standard developers. And so it's really hard to build small, efficient housing. And I'm assuming multifamily is kind of similar here. I don't have any problem with multifamily housing at all. I mean, I think it's a great thing. And I don't think there's a whole lot of limitations on where. That I think the water is probably the one limitation that there is.
So that's interesting, Dan. So would tiny homes fall in that category?
Tiny homes are just smaller homes, right? Like the
Mhm.
building codes require all kinds of odd things like and like in my case, I don't like gutters. I think they're a fire hazard. But to avoid gutters, I have to put in an infiltrator system because that's just a requirement, despite the fact that the soil percolates well enough that it didn't need it. This is just a prescriptive requirement that added, I don't know, 15 some odd $1,000 to the build for no measurable improvement. That would be the kind of thing that someone should go and look through those codes and just make them simpler for I'm going to call it smaller builders to do, because I think that would reduce costs significantly.
Right.
I know aesthetic is on the mind for a lot of people around here as well. They want whatever to be built as close to what's historically around them rather than the more modern looking builds. But again, we're looking at more expensive when we go that route.
Sure.
Yeah, and Mark, I don't know if you're looking for staff's input
Oh, yeah.
or not.
Jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say the obvious. Near infrastructure, we have centralized sanitation there. So if we can get it near there or with the ability to pull it, obviously we want that. We do have some hydrogeology information and definitely some hydrogeology that's more favorable in certain areas. So with issues with the water, there could be some overlays there. But yeah, infrastructure. Same with access to, obviously, accessibility and kind of ensuring that the access doesn't impede in certain areas as well.
Right.
Thanks, Adam. Go on, Dan.
And just a quick note, I have to mostly mute myself and turn off the camera, but I'm still listening and I'll put answers in chat.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to read a chat here from Nancy. My concern lies in prioritizing new housing over commercial developments or whatever is the appropriate term. For example, the new RV park location would have been perfect for multifamily or single family housing. So that came from Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely correct. That would have been a great place for multifamily housing.
Okay. So on that note, we're starting to discuss a little bit about location or where some of this housing could go. Any other thoughts on that? We've heard about perhaps the RV site would have been a location for housing. Adam brought up the need to think about infrastructure and access. That's a more general term to think about appropriate places for housing. Any other thoughts?
I think that when you're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about roads, but I look at very much the bike path as infrastructure, and that I would happily take that to Georgetown or to Idaho Springs if it was someday a safe option for pedestrian or bike traffic.
Okay. Any others? Okay, so any other thoughts about new housing before we move on to existing?
Just a question, and this may have been discussed. I didn't participate in the first meeting. How do we quantify the amount of demand for various types of housing in the area? One of the things that has been discussed is the decline in the population. So it's just a little difficult for me to get my head around what the demand would be for new multifamily housing within the area? And how do we get a handle around that? Even before we start looking at implications in terms of infrastructure.
It's a very good point. Adam, I might just lean on you a little bit here. I know that there's a housing study is that complete yet? I know there's one happening or very recently happened, which may inform,
Yeah,
Mike's
sure.
point.
I think we're still in the middle of that. I don't know if I have
Okay.
much input at this point in time, but yeah, it's a good question, and I think we're still working on that answer on that.
So Mike, parallel to this process, the county is working on
Yep.
a housing study that will definitely inform, your point right there, and also, many other things we're talking about here tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, I am told that we want to wrap up by 5:20, just an FYI, so I'll keep an eye on the clock. So if we were to prioritize improving the existing housing, so what should we prioritize? So think, again, and it's, not just the mobile home parks, but I'm sure that's on folks' minds. What thoughts do we have about existing housing in the area?
Well, since you brought up mobile home parks, and that's where I'm at in the middle of trying to save my own mobile home park right now. I really believe in resident-owned communities and any way to improve our own. And when I think infrastructure, I think everything from roads to the water to electrical to, everything. And
It all
one
counts.
of the biggest plaguing mobile home parks right now are the fires, which are largely started by electrical. And I would personally at least like to address maybe helping the more aging ones be able to get up to code in their electrical to even prevent these fires to begin with. Because even with insurance, the mitigation costs are insane. Especially if somebody doesn't have renter's insurance in our case. So, I would like to see that. I have heard that there is capability of being able to put, utilizing the same footprint as our current homes have, sticking some kind of small home in its place in a permanent foundation. If that's an ability to do without much of an increase in cost to us, I'm pretty sure most people would be on board. Because we all are aware of how pretty worthless our places are.
So Autumn, just to make sure I caught that, the idea of new homes on existing foundations. So use some of the foundational infrastructure and just kind of wipe the slate clean in some instances.
That it would be nice if we could do that without increasing the price point too much of what it is already on us. At current, looking at all the options available, the reality is the easiest and fastest way for us to do it would be to go through something like Thistle Rock, where we would literally learn how to run our own parks. And cost effective wise, it would be cheaper to replace each of these places with permanent structures that are affordable in the same footprint. But on a foundation, there's no existing foundation. I mean, there's some slabs, but
Right.
We have some existing infrastructure. Whether or not that can be done, I don't know. But that is something several people around have been throwing back and forth. It'd be nice if we could have that, but really that's a pipe dream for us.
Okay.
In the very least, helping us with the electrical infrastructure and at least the older homes. The oldest homes get done first type thing. And then, that would be an amazing, lift to us as a resident-owned community to be able to work towards the pipe dream goal in the future.
Okay. Thanks. So Autumn has obviously done some thinking about this. How about some other folks? And Linda, welcome. We're discussing housing needs in the area, and right now we're talking about improving existing housing. Before you joined us, we discussed the need potentially for new housing. So if you have any thoughts on any of that, please chime in. Others would like to build on Autumn, what Autumn had to say, or just talk about the existing housing situation and housing stock in the DLD?
I would love to hear folks' thought about, I know staff's chatted or batted around the idea of an architectural or some type of overlay district, maybe along the I-70 corridor, and this could include this area, but, we haven't done anything with that. And obviously that would be a public engagement piece, but, it'd be interesting to know what folks thought about that as well.
Anyone like to address Adam's point?
Yeah, I guess just expanding on that to maybe have some type of requirements that may be additional on architectural treatment and visual impact. Right now, we really don't have much in the code that we have a small bit in the code that says how things need to look as far as improvements go. So, that's always a thought, I think that some people may agree with and not agree with. So, yep.
Yeah, it can be difficult or challenging to balance codes and requirements or guidelines that talk about the aesthetics or the architectural treatments, but at the same time keeping it affordable and not being too prescriptive, right? Not being, having the freedom to not impinge on development. So we've got some thoughts here in the chat. Dan said one thought: the mobile homes aren't worthless; they are housing for people who are in our county. And Nancy said, is there a way to prioritize primary residences versus second homes, or prioritize long-term rentals versus short-term rentals? Somehow give incentives to owners to live here full-time and rent to locals versus housing that's rarely used or used as short-term rentals. So we had some discussion about this at the public meeting for sure, and I believe at our first steering committee meeting, and then earlier in this steering committee meeting. Any thoughts on that? I hate to pick on Adam because he's the staff here, but about our ways to focus more on providing houses for permanent local residents as opposed to short-term rentals.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we have a lot of avenues, and I think that's why that housing plan is kind of in place. I think that was kind of a first step. This is another step, and it all provides kind of general input on, what we're looking for regulation changes. And so that could lead, all of this input could lead to some, regulation changes that happen that provide some incentivize or provide some additional incentives, I guess, for lack of a better word, on prioritizing that pathway.
Sure. And a couple more, and then maybe we'll move on to, we've already been discussing mobile home parks. We can continue that conversation. Dan says he doesn't particularly like aesthetic requirements, that they will evolve over time. And Nancy concurs, not terribly concerned about aesthetics. So again, there's certainly arguments to be made on both sides of that, that, folks want things to, for lack of a better term, to look nice, but at the same time, we don't want to impinge on the ability to increase and improve the housing stock and housing supply. And so we've already talked some, especially Autumn, about mobile homes and mobile home parks. So let's have that discussion maybe a little bit deeper about mobile home parks. Should they be protected or even redeveloped or encouraged or incentivized redevelopment of mobile home parks? And to Autumn's point, talk about resident-owned communities, right? Encourage ownership. So I'd like to open it up to that. And if folks have any thoughts about housing at all, we'll go ahead and take any thoughts too.
I don't think necessarily redeveloping them is the properties is necessarily gonna be the right way to go.
Okay.
You know, the structures that the way they are, the way they're set up now. If we are to redevelop them, we gotta get the same thing, same size thing in the same footprint. Because stacking people like us on top of each other and say a multi-level apartment building we need our room to spread out. And that's part of why we live in a mobile home park rather than apartment building. We're close to our neighbors, but not uncomfortably close. We're able to do our own thing and keep our way of life, but still be able to work together with each other as we need. And that's what we want to keep. And putting us all in a box on like sardine cans, bad idea. But we can't lose people either. Yeah,
Sure.
like if a trailer burns up, you know, there is in a lot of these parks, there's not room to replace that trailer because of code. So, you know, from that aspect, we can't really do much to redevelop them.
Okay.
Not without losing places or stacking them on top of each other, and that's not gonna be how we stick around.
So a couple of thoughts there. One, Dan does mention or brings up in the chat to protect the residents, whether that's via tenant ownership or some other protections is the important part. I think Autumn would agree and others would agree with that. Regardless of where you live, right? So I think thinking about mobile home parks, that's the affordable housing option that's most prevalent in the area. And I'm curious to see if anyone has different thoughts than Autumn about multifamily housing. There are certainly a lot of folks that want to have room to spread out. But as another affordable option, does anyone have thoughts or agree with Nancy or have thoughts that might not match hers regarding multifamily housing? We have to fill 2 minutes. So someone can share their thoughts about that or any other aspects. I saw Adam, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm indifferent to that, but I do think, you know, where you do have infrastructure and whether that's, you know, water, sanitation or access, makes sense to have, you know, a little more density if that's what you're going for. I definitely understand, you know, there's two sides to that story, but that would be my thought. If we're looking for housing, multifamily could be a good component to that. Doesn't need to be the only component, but could be. But I know it's a sensitive topic as well. So
Yes, it can be. And Dan says he doesn't have a problem with multifamily housing, even via redevelopment of mobile home parks, so long, he just says all caps, so long as residents are in favor of it. So you know, kind of walking that line there with Autumn, you know, it's as long as folks want it and there's a demand for it, and then you'd be in favor for it, which seems like a pretty reasonable stance to me. So
I know some of the mobile home parks like Western and stuff that don't necessarily qualify underneath certain mobile home to be even qualifying as a mobile home park have things like the old Cub Scout cabins, the one Victorian Village. They have the old Cub Scout cabins. Those are historical in nature. I do know that people would like some of our history preserved if we can.
Yep.
You know, I believe there was a bar or a former bar in the Western. I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but being able to preserve the historical nature of those would also be on par for most everybody, but again, what's the cost?
Mhm. Wonderful. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm gonna message Nancy and let her know that we're ready. Autumn, do you mind reporting back on the highlights of what we discussed? Were you able to take notes, or would you prefer I do that? You're on mute, sorry.
Maybe you should, because I did miss a couple of things in
Okay,
there.
yes, I gave you an out there, so I'm happy to do
Thank
that.
you.
All
All
right, you're
right.
welcome. All right, let's see if we get a couple minutes here to join the group. So thanks a lot.
They were faster than us.
Okay, you're back online in the room.
There's more.
Nancy,
Yeah,
they're here, so do you wanna?
okay. Mark, does your group have a reporter?
Well, I gave them an out and said I'd be happy to do it, and they took me up on that. So I am, I'm the reporter.
I'm not that nice. Okay, go, Mark.
Okay, and please, online friends chime in if I either get something wrong or miss something. So talking about new housing, I think there was, a fair amount of concurrence that, yes, there is a need for new housing, to increase the housing supply. And, but a couple of caveats. One, it should be affordable. And it was mentioned several times about water access as well. There, we have to think about water with any new or even existing housing, and looking and thinking about perhaps where the new housing might be. Some thoughts regarding locating where there's decent infrastructure and access readily available. Instead of having to provide, or, if the area and the county is already invested in infrastructure, let's take advantage of that. There were a couple of folks who thought that perhaps the new RV park could have been, or was, or is a good location for new multifamily housing or housing in general. And then also locating new housing along pedestrian and bicycle facilities, including the future greenway and other current infrastructure. Thinking about types of housing, multifamily units did come up, so perhaps increasing density, but again, it has to have some infrastructure support, including water access. And then code enforcement came up a couple of times too, making sure that the codes are being enforced, and some folks thinking, well, there might be some of the codes might restrict the development of particular types of housing, including, small housing or tiny houses, minimum number of bedrooms, et cetera. There was a discussion about aesthetics, and I kind of came down on both sides of it there. There's the want or desire to reflect the historical nature, and but also that it could be a little bit more expensive to build housing that has to meet some aesthetic requirements, and folks generally don't want it to get in the way of increasing the housing supply in terms of the development community. And there was a question, and a good one, about, so we're talking about housing here, but we're also talking about a decline in population. So what is the actual demand? What is the demand for housing? What types of housing are in demand? And Adam shared that, there's a current housing study the county's doing right now that is not finished, but will hopefully start to answer some of those questions on the demand side. So I think there's definitely interest in that housing study, which I think was a very good question. And so and let's move on to existing housing. So if improving existing housing, what are the key things to think about? There was support, Autumn, for sure, as we know, resident-owned communities in terms of the RV parks. Again, talking about code, the wish to make sure units are up to code, especially in terms of electrical, with the fire risk, et cetera, and that perhaps some of the older homes could be done first. Somehow prioritize those homes that are most in need of improvements, especially to get up to code. Maybe looking at where there are some existing homes, whether mobile homes or not, where new homes could be built in the location of existing homes, if those homes are in condition or not livable condition, or deemed for some reason could be replaced by new housing. There was a discussion about that. And also the topic about short-term rentals came up again, and the desire to focus on long-term rentals and housing local residents in a more long-term or permanent basis. And then additional discussion about mobile home parks and some other miscellaneous topics. There's some discussion about redevelopment of mobile home parks, and different opinions about whether or not, some folks in mobile homes would prefer to live in a mobile home with a little bit of land to stretch out, and others, maybe if another affordable option were to be multifamily housing, where they, they have their own space, but not necessarily their own yard, the ability to provide some variety to accommodate those different desires. But again, the need to make sure that there's infrastructure readily available, or at least relatively inexpensive, to be able to service some of those developments. Okay, I probably talked too much, but those are all the notes I had.
Did he miss anything?
Okay.
No? We're not telling on him. Okay, does our reporter want to just maybe add in what we have?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. That was really good. And just to manage expectations, I'm not going to do nearly as good of a job as you just did articulating it. But we had a lot of the same dovetailing and overlaying conversations as what sounds like your group had as well. Affordable housing certainly is a priority and topic of conversation that we really focused on. And trying to look at, more how do we do that so that if as a community, we're able to come together to get a project going, how would we not only incentivize this for our locals, make sure this is hitting the best and highest use for the people that need it the most, i.e. the affordable workforce housing demographic. So some of the ideas we came up with is if there are personal properties, looking at deed restrictions or other mechanisms to keep them affordable for locals, workers. We dove into the wheres, that seems to be a big one, is not only the conversation about do we need this, but where it would make sense. The LDS space came up again, of course. Mill Creek was addressed, and there's some other county parcels in the area. It was discussed that if we did anything, it would seem advantageous or behoove any projects in terms of just their expedience of getting it done to be able to either subsidize a project or put them on a sewer, or make sure they're tied, the ability to tie them to the existing sewer lines in the community county. And then, of course, conversation about redeveloping existing parcels of land, such as there's a 2-acre parcel on the north side of the highway across from the way station that would be a great spot is sort of discussion. We also talked in terms about some of the RV parks and some of the other areas, how to steer that towards the county's master plan and being able to make sure that that's a viable potential for the future. And land banking came up, which I thought was a very interesting piece of discussion that had not been previously addressed. We looked at other ways to promote housing, such as discussion around ADUs potentially. There's a way to set them up so that they're not just for short-term rentals. We also, someone brought up, bringing in Habitat for Humanity or how to that to see if there is a cohabitation project that we could work on as a community, a county, and with a Habitat style group. And then when we jumped over to the, looking at improving existing, what would that entail? The cost, condition, the electrical, ideally the aging structures, the health and safety were the largest concerns, similar to what it sounds like your group had as well. And of course, how to incentivize that for the existing property owners without displacing anyone or pricing them out of their own dwellings. I'm not sure what MHP was.
Mobile home parks.
Oh, yes, the mobile home parks. Okay, so yes, I think we just kind of hit on that. Group, was there anything else you guys felt that we needed to throw in there that I may have missed? Does that pretty much sum up our side of things?
But we talked about water as a.
Yeah, water of course is always I wouldn't even say underlying issue. It's the forefront conversation. It's kind of the precursor to water and then if. So water, of course, came up and it was addressed that we'll be doing a deeper dive on that in a coming meeting as well.
Real quick, I'm sorry, Mike, could you please mute your phone? We're getting a little bit of feedback.
Hearing a deeper dive from Peter.
Thank you.
Well, you held together real well over it.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Thanks, Mark. You did great. All right, now let's think about everything we heard. Is there anything we're missing?
One thing that came up in my mind was just adding to the existing conversation, whether we put it under improvements or other, but you know, if it's not economically feasible in a way that wouldn't just drastically increase property taxes or some other tax we'd have to bear as you know, members of this community, if there's a way to, you know, say, put the savings or the ability to allow these projects and improvements via something like tax abatements, where the county's not putting money up to get this done, but the consumer or the homeowner is able to still move this forward, knowing that they're gonna get a tax reduction on the back end. You know, anything along those lines. I don't think we put that on there, but that, you know, just kind of one more thing to add to our conversation.
Okay,
You mean for if a developer came in, you're saying? the tax
Even if someone
incentives for
wants to
them,
make
or-
improvements to their existing, like the conversation we had.
Yeah,
where,
because there are programs for
hypothetical.
that.
Yeah, and so I mean, I don't know that it'd be economically feasible for our limited resources in this community for the county to provide that for everyone. You know, be able to give them a stipend, you know, because certain projects, and then how do you bid with contractors? But if we can do it on the back end where, you know, we can say, well, if you did, you know, this work and what are those parameters would have to be, of course, to meet, check that box, but offer a tax abatement so that the improvements do equal savings, at least on property tax or some other
Right.
form that would benefit members of our community.
I know I've watched the development meetings before, and we've had developers come in and literally want the land donated to them. You know, that's an incentive for them to come in, and I don't want that to happen personally, but you know, if you were to want to develop your land, that could be something to look into.
Certainly.
Autumn has her hand
Correct.
up, if that's okay, so you can give Autumn a chance to speak here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, some kind of tax abatement should be something to handle at the state level then.
some of it's federal, some of it's state, some of it's local.
Yeah.
I mean, local's got property tax, that's about it.
I'm already down at the state, so if we can come up with language, I can.
Just tell them right now. Give them proof for
Oh,
us.
I can see what kind, they won't be able to pass it this year. They're done on the 8th, so there's not enough time to get a bill passed in this time, but you know, next year we could definitely get like a tax rebate or something at the state level for something like this.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, Linda.
Linda, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was driving home and it wouldn't let me talk earlier and I was like, no, no, no. And now I'm home, but we were talking about the improvements to some of these mobile homes and things that might be done. What about putting a tiny home in its place? That might fall in line with the tax abatement or tax I don't know. Just if you put a tiny home, you're going to use the same footprint and you're going to have, you know, a newer home that's up to date, up to code, and possibly with the same space. I don't know. I haven't really compared apples to apples, but it was just kind of a thought that popped into my head.
Yeah, I think that's an example of kind of the redevelopment pathway that would be with, but I think it, you know, that could also be done in a way that would include non-displacement, you know, and that's an example that is
That's the biggie.
is the trick, right?
Does the county allow them? Would you allow someone to?
The county does allow tiny homes
In a
and
mobile home park?
well, that would take a little
What
work.
if they just
but
put in another mobile home?
That would also work.
They
It
said you
depends
can't
on,
bring any.
depends on the
I
zoning.
can't take mine with me. You know,
There-
what's
there's,
the-
Oh,
but those are, it depends on the zoning of the mobile
Right,
home
you
park.
can't bring one in or take one out.
It depends on the zoning of the mobile
Yeah.
home park.
But we don't.
That's the
Yeah.
trap.
That doesn't seem.
But I think, so as we are getting close to time here,
I mean, that.
the way that these,
That's what hurts us.
the way we were gonna, the way to take an idea like Linda's or the ideas that we've generated today, they will be, we'll be taking these ideas and then bringing them back to you when we bring a draft plan in July and August. And we will be converting these ideas into kind of more general guidelines and rules that can guide future planning projects for the long run. Because that's one of the kind of tricks of Nancy's art as a professional planner and the expertise that the craft of developing this into a planning project is the work that we're doing here together, is taking all of the ideas and inputs and suggestions and goals and hopes and dreams, and then figuring out how do we build that into priorities and rules, for lack of a better word, that will help us guide future projects. So somebody who has a goal of building affordable housing isn't stymied by code. And somebody who has a goal of monetizing their property with an ADU has a path forward in that, because we've identified that as a priority for the community. That's the task at hand. That's what we're working on here together. That's what we're working on.
Yeah, so we talk about maybe goals, objectives, and strategies. And sometimes they're not gonna match the existing zoning. So when you said, whoa, but those parcels, are they zoned correctly now? They might not be, but we might have a strategy to say, do an analysis of county-owned parcels and strategize or strategic rezonings to allow for affordable housing projects.
So we are going to need to wrap in
now
4 or 5 minutes.
I just have a quick question. So will the study be done on needing to know I know when you guys have done these in the past, they'll say, we need 300 units. We need, will that study be done by July when this will be presented?
So that's a great
That's the
clarification.
housing study.
We're not doing a new needs assessment with this current housing project. We
So how
are,
do we know how many units?
So you're looking at capacity for
Yes.
for DLD.
that will not be something that will be produced directly with this project, but the guidelines that will help us make sure the next needs assessment will do a better job with that will be produced. But the MJHA, all of that stuff will help us develop that next needs assessment. The current needs assessment will have to serve our,
So when will that one be done?
the next needs assessment,
What you said,
the MJHA.
Yes,
We hope to form that later this year.
okay.
I can tell
Too
you,
many
you need some
abbreviations,
rental
right?
housing. There isn't any, yeah.
So
Right now.
next steps.
So next steps, we're gonna take this back, as she said, and formulate them into goals, objectives, strategies. Our next meeting is May 16th. I won't be here. But we're gonna focus on transportation and safety. So think about sidewalks and trails and safer road infrastructure. And that's gonna be our focus. We're gonna do a very similar exercise where we're gonna ask you guys to come up with some of those strategies. So encourage people to come. Not sure what happened today because we had lots of excitement last time. And we wanna get that back. But you guys did awesome work, so thank you
I
very
think
much.
it's because there's the public meeting and the steering, so people want to be part of the public. And they're
Not
wanting
on
other
the
people to
steering.
be part of the steering, yes.
The time of the meeting is also very challenging. It was
Yes.
very
Yes.
challenging for
Yes.
me. Having a 4 o'clock meeting is just like today, I really only got to be a part of it for the last half hour of the meeting. If you maybe could consider starting a little bit later. I
Okay.
think be able to get more people to come to the meeting because they're not at work.
Okay.
That's next.
Snacks, okay.
Yeah, it was.
No, we
tough
didn't
to
have
me.
snacks.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys. This is great information.
Back
You did
also.
great work.
Good for me to end the meeting on mine.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.